title?
Is it running?
Yeah.
My name is Henning Steinfeld, and I'm the Chief of the Livestock Information Sector Analysis and Livestock Policy Branch.
Okay. And so my first question is what is the FAO doing in terms of reducing methane from agriculture, in particular from enteric methane from ruminants?
Well, we are looking particularly at ruminant livestock. And we're looking at ruminant livestock in two ways. One, it has a capacity to turn resources that are not readily usable in other ways into valuable animal products and services. And that has a particularly important function for people who critically depend on these animals. So I'm talking about pastoralists, I'm talking about smallholders, I'm talking about a wide range of people who depend on livestock and the capacity of livestock to use resources which can't be used otherwise into valuable resources. Then this capacity of animals to turn roughage into milk, meat, draft, manure also goes with certain disadvantages. And that is you're employing the ruminant, the animal, to digest the material for you, but you're having methane as a result. So it is an area where I think a lot can be done in terms of improving productivity, whereby reducing emission intensity, because this machine, the rumen, can be greatly improved.
Right. Practical terms, what is some of the work that you have done? FAO and the Climate Clean Air Coalition have worked together on the first phase of a project. Could you describe that project to us?
Well, until now, or until very recently, there has not been a lot of focus on enteric methane or on methane in general. So the collaboration with CCAC was quite useful in starting to create a focus on enteric methane, which hitherto was not really present. So we're having two, if you want, contrasting demands on ruminant livestock. We're having a strong expansion of demand for milk in particular, but also for beef and small ruminant products. And at the same time, we're having the demands of countries who have committed in their NDCs, in their commitments to the Paris Agreement, to reduce their emissions. And one of the most cited or most named way of doing this is through reducing emissions in the livestock sector, particularly enteric methane. So we're having strong demand on the one side, and we're having a strong call to look at emissions on the other side. So how do we put these two things together is really the question that we have to ask ourselves. And because of the relatively low levels of productivity that we have in many developing countries, we are seeing quite an important potential to do actually both, to increase food security, to create profitable livestock enterprises, while at the same time reducing emissions. So this happens largely through the productivity angle, because we are tweaking the animal to give us more and use less in some way. And making that system more efficient requires solutions at the technological front, but also the institutional marketing and processing and so on. Those elements need to come together to make ruminant livestock, which has been a much neglected sector in terms of agricultural development, gets on its feet to do actually both.
So what is so phase one was what? Studies looking into that, yeah?
Phase one was scoping. See, is there an interest? See, is there a potential? See, are there useful connections on which we can build? See if there is a focus and a willingness to look at carbon flows, because we're looking at carbon flows, not only methane, but we're looking at soil carbon. Is there an ability and a willingness to look at the cycle of carbon in these agricultural systems? And with that understanding, you're getting an idea of where efficiency gains can be made. And you need to look at methane as a loss, as something that you lose because it's energy you lose, which is not turned into something useful. It's turned into something bad. So you want to direct that towards a more efficient use of that resource and have less of emissions, which you can by interventions which are both technical and further on also economic and institutional.
Right. So what's the phase, now that it's done, what is the plan to move on to the second phase?
The second phase is to try to put this into practice. And with the resources available, you need to be very strategic. You need to build on efforts which are ongoing. You cannot go into a country and say, we're building a program to reduce methane. That is, in the ruminant sector, not quite possible. You need to come in and say, look, a focus on methane helps you to address productivity questions. It identifies losses of energy which you may want to capture for productivity purposes. So you're looking at the ruminant system as something that you want to improve productivity. And it is through productivity increases that you get the reduction in emission intensity. And as this goes on, and as you bring more change into neglected areas, but also the mainstream, then you will see a real reduction on both fronts, actually.
Great. So, last question. What would you like to see happen? Do you have any idea yet where this will be played out, or are you still investigating that?
Well, we have been looking at a variety of countries, but we have now a very well-established collaboration and a very good analytical base with countries like Uruguay, Ethiopia, and Bangladesh. And what we are seeing is that we're moving on from basically just finding our way into much more concrete action as to what can be done to improve our understanding of inventories and trying to build a solid knowledge base upon which we can base our assessments and monitor our progress, looking also at ways by which we can actually tailor the suite of technologies to specific situations, because livestock systems are very diverse. They are part of their sometimes only semi-natural or natural environment. So they're very, very, very specific in what they need. And then also to try to deal with these systems in the way that you support them in a very specific and targeted way. So this needs a lot of fine-tuning. It needs a lot of understanding, of the diversity and also of the dynamics of these systems, both in ecological and socio-economic terms, that, this is actually now what we have to put into practice. And it is through the integration of different technical domains and ministry departments that we build the knowledge and I hope the willingness to act to push this further.
FAO is not normally a climate change sort of organization, but do you see this new sort of climate smart agriculture as, the potential for it around the world growing? What do you see the potential for?
I think that FAO is very much a climate change action area and institution, because FAO critically understands that food security will only be achieved when and if agriculture can respond to climate change. So that capacity needs to be there. And there's a first critical thing that we need to do in this regard. And this is really the productive capacity of agriculture to function. And that is threatened by climate change and other factors which have degraded and undermined many of the resources that agriculture depends on. So you look at agriculture as an area, as a sector, which is exposed and threatened by climate change like no other sector. It is exposed, it is vulnerable. And at the same time, you look at what it means to come with, or to produce as much food that is required for 9.6 billion people in 2050. Another 2 billion more. Not only more people, but also more diversified diets, rich, more aspirations and more wish for material welfare, if you wish. So all this comes together, and it's a collision. It's a collision, and a focus that you look at how carbon in this particular case flows through an agriculture system, and at each of these stages that carbon flows through, you look at ways how you capture more, how do you tweak the process in order to have less emissions but harvest more energy. That is a useful focus. In the particular case of enteric methane, I think what needs to be done is connect the discussion to soil carbon. So that's CO2, it's not the mandate of the CCSC, but I think that we need to look at enteric methane as part of the carbon cycle. The entire movement, stocks, cascades, the different forms that we have by which carbon moves through food and agriculture systems in terms of resources, in terms of production, processing, consumption, and back.
Why should countries move in these new directions for them, and what kind of support and what sort of benefits you think they will get from doing this?
Well, the original motivation is climate change, since we are talking about CCSC. But I think it is clear that a focus on methane helps in addressing efficiency. And efficiency is key to our being productive, to being profitable, but also to being viable in the mid to long term. So a focus on methane allows countries to explicitly address how methane is used and emitted, and what the various places of intervention are. But that focus of productivity has largely positive implications for food security, livelihoods, incomes, markets, and socio-economic development in general. So I think countries see that with the ruminant sector they have a large scope for improvement, also because if you look at the carbon intensity of livestock products compared to other agricultural products, then you will find that per value livestock ranks very high. So in other words, reductions, if they are substantial, are very good in terms of bringing down the emission budget of a country. So countries really see this as an area where climate and ecological benefits and socio-economic benefits can be brought together quite easily. It requires a push, because we are talking about many hundreds, thousands, millions of, in certain countries, of smallholders that need to be involved. So it's not something that is easy to be done because of the remoteness also of these people living in very diverse and remote environments. So it requires a large effort. But if you think of it in terms not only of climate, but the other and more important benefits, then look at the multiple benefits. Look at everything you harvest in terms of benefits. Add that together, and you'll find it's a very profitable, a very smart investment.
Great, thank you.